The Epstein files and everything surrounding the case has been one of the biggest news stories of the last year, maybe the last couple of years. This is one of the biggest political happenings ever. It's probably up there with 9/11, the war on terror.
What the f*** are you doing? What are you doing?
The 2008 financial crash, COVID-19, and of course, Hillary Clinton chilling at Cedar Rapids.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
And I know there's been a lot of discourse at the minute talking about release the files. Wait, there are no files. But now it seems that at least partially the files have been released. Yep, Christmas has definitely came early this year. But first of all, I want you to take yourself back to the year 2015.
Oh, guys, we did it.
10 years ago. That is horrifying to think of. Death Grips released their album, The Powers That Be. Bloodborne came out on the PS4. And my main channel just reached
250,000 subscribers.
And in America, Trump announced his presidential campaign to be president in 2016.
For President of the United States.
Now, the way that most people get into office is kind of on like a lower level, like for example, you know, some kind of groundwork, you know, helping run like a city council or something like that. And then they go a step up, like they try and run for, let's say, mayorship, or they even try and break into the Senate or the House of Representatives. This is like the typical path that most people would follow to try and get a name for themselves. But Trump didn't do this. He basically barged his way into the Republican primaries and he somehow won. There was actually a bit that Shane Gillis, a stand-up comedian, did, and he basically illustrated how Trump became the political figure that he did.
And then it finally got to Trump's turn to talk, and he was just like, Rand Paul is ugly? And the whole crowd was like, oh! We didn't know you could do that in this. You can just do that as your thing?
He was someone who didn't really try to conform to, you know, what other politicians did. He was the guy who was known for saying it as it was, even if what he was saying wasn't entirely true. But at the time, he was really active and provocative, and that actually really helped him build this kind of like cult of personality. Now, again, this was before he was president. Now he's president on his second term. America isn't looking that great. America is never looking that great, but at the minute, it's looking less great than it usually is. He's already been president once, so he can't really pull the I'm an outsider card again. And he wasn't someone that was going to shake up the establishment, because when you're president, you are the establishment. So one way that he tried to gain a lot of public respect back is to say that once we get the Epstein files, we will release them. The world will know how much of a bad man he is and all the bad people associated with him.
Declassify the Epstein files.
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
And this would have like shook up the entire scene, like politicians, billionaires. So that was like a calling back of his 2016 persona, where he said he was going to shake up the system, which is probably the best way that he could have. But obviously, we know now that anytime the Epstein files are brought up, Trump is basically like, we don't have to talk about that.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends.
Now, Trump has like actively dismissed Epstein at basically every single turn. He's never shown support recently. But obviously, the fact that he's being so dismissive of the files that he promised to actually expose, it seems like a little bit of like one step forward, 10 trillion steps back. So in February of this year, the government dropped what they call phase one. Like, we're treating this like it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And they got these files and handed them to a bunch of conservative influencers. Now, I'm not sure why they did a staggered release of like phase one of the Epstein Cinematic Universe, like it's Deltarune or something. But once the influencers had it and they shared it, obviously the public got to see it. But it turns out that phase one of the Epstein Cinematic Universe was a bit of a blunder, because the information that the influencers were talking about, it was pretty much public knowledge anyway, because, you know, it had already been declassified. The public could read it. You actually had Anna Paulina Luna, who was the chairman of the task force that was for declassifying federal secrets, actually went onto Twitter saying that her nor the task force were given the documents to review before they went public. And again, she reiterates that all of this is just like really old and pointless information. So it was kind of crickets. And again, people were pushing Trump, saying over and over, you know, release the files, release the files. And it wasn't until July the 5th where things really started to take a turn. So the Department of Justice ended up releasing a statement, and they basically did this massive cope saying that there is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a client list, meaning that there will be no release of names or people who visited the island. I mean, we can't release the files, right? Because they don't exist. And then to make things even more bizarre, Trump hopped onto his own version of Twitter, Truth Social, to basically have a giant cope.
4 years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration? They created the Epstein files. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Now, again, this is someone who publicly said he will release the Epstein files, and he has done a monolithic U-turn. He basically went from, yeah, the files are here, they're sitting on my desk, I'm going to post it, to basically making it out that you're rent-free obsessed. Anyway, moving on. Even going on to basically blame all the lefties for the reason why the Epstein files even exist in the first place, to apparently try and pin it on him. And it looks even worse because you've had certain people like Ghislaine Maxwell, who was basically Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice, speak out in defense of Trump, apparently saying that him and Epstein actually had a falling out over the girls that he hired. And then she was also moved, as you know, from a low security prison to a minimum security prison. I didn't even know minimum security prisons existed. I thought low was just the lowest one. And if you look at the photos of the prison she's in, which is in Bryan, Texas, you know what? For all the crimes allegedly committed, not doing too bad. But we know all that. I was just doing the Netflix Breaking Bad series recap. You know, we have to make the videos as long as possible. But now it seems that there has been another 33,000 pages of the Epstein files that were released by the US House of Representatives panel. This includes flight logs, jail surveillance video, court filings, audio recordings, emails. Now, I know what you're thinking when you hear surveillance videos. We've all seen that clip of Epstein walking across with the really bad CCTV footage, and then people immediately got it and started doing AI edits of it, trying to act like it was real. Now, this is huge, right? 33,000 pages. There has to be something here. But as we know, in today's world, nothing ever happens. Because apparently there was a Kentucky congressman who was on the panel when this document came out and basically said, as far as he could see, there's nothing new in these documents. But with that said, there is a fair amount of stuff that we haven't actually seen before and some content that people have been asking for a while. For instance, you know, back in July when that surveillance footage of Jeffrey Epstein was released to the public, there was this like bizarre missing minute of footage, like there was a jump cut. Now, the official cope that they had is because it was so close to midnight, that's when the cameras officially reset, which again is very suspicious and very convenient to have the cameras reset at the exact time when Jeffrey Epstein is being involved. But in the new release of this 33,000 page document, this minute has apparently been restored. This minute there apparently doesn't exist because the cameras roll over at midnight. Okay, wait, so you didn't have the footage because it's the way the camera system works, but now you quick revive the footage? I'm so confused. Now, a lot of people were hoping in this restored minute of footage, you know, the Snyder Cut, that there'd be this scene of like, you know, the FBI breaking into his cell and orchestrating it, so he hung himself. But again, there's nothing. In this restored minute of footage, in the Snyder Cut, there is nothing. But again, this does show that they lied. They basically said the cameras reset, so there'll always be a missing minute of footage, but the footage was restored with footage that doesn't exist. So it does show in these situations, they are willing to lie to the public to try to cover things up. This restored minute of footage also had 13 hours and 41 seconds of footage taken from the CCTV footage in the facility where Epstein was being held. And this covered the evening of August the 9th to the morning of August the 10th, which is the time period where he died. There were also hours and hours of interviews between police officers and the girls that Epstein had actually abused. And that's great that that information's out there, but it really doesn't change the narrative that everyone already knew about Jeffrey Epstein. But I think the only positive here is it really does show like a human side to the case, because obviously like a lot of the victims here have kind of been lost in the entire scandal of like politics and trying to get Trump to basically release the files, and he's coping, saying that they don't exist. On top of this as well, there was also an hour of body cam footage from police officers that were searching a property which was owned by Epstein on Palm Beach. But wait a minute. They released flight logs? There was a private jet from 2000 to 2013 and they have the flight. Oh, wait, no. There's no passenger list. How convenient. All the files show here in this new massive update is that Epstein traveled a lot. Great. You know who else travels a lot by private jet? Taylor Swift. Great. I'd love to know where she's traveling to. This tells us absolutely nothing. Did you know a billionaire has a private jet and they travel a lot? Oh my, thank you. Thank you for declassifying that information. No, I really needed to know that. Thank you. So unfortunately, people have scoured the files and it seems that the majority of it is just absolute cope. It's not bringing anything new to the table. It's just building on things that we already know about. Like, for example, Jeffrey Epstein was an evil man. More news at 11. Now, a lot of people seem to think that this might be the end of the Epstein case, to the point that the government are just going to keep putting out these like incredibly bloated documents to the point that people get burnt out and basically just give up and stop pursuing it. But I think what's happening right now is an absolute Streisand effect. The more that they try to cover up the situation, the more people are going to obsess and look into it and dig into it. And at the minute as well, there's actually a group of women who claim to be victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And what they're doing now, that they've gathered together and they're actually starting to make their own client list from memory. And they also claim as well that the US government is not actually releasing all the information that they have access to. So yeah, again, I like they'll just keep releasing these files, I feel, until people get burnt out or give up. But it is crazy that they dropped 33,000 pages and the majority of it is just an absolute nothing burger. I mean, I feel like if we're going to get the absolute truth, it won't happen until very, very later down the line when Trump has been probably years, if not a full decade out of office. Like there's this thing that presidents do where they tend to declassify files on previous presidents. Like, for example, how Trump actually declassified files related to JFK's assassination. So yeah, at the minute, nothing ever happens.